Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you, Amy, for joining us. You're one of our fantastic practitioners on Odyssey, the platform. The idea with Odyssey, the platform, is to bring forward issues, feelings, emotions, whatever comes up, whatever thrown to the surface. And we are both therapists and we work in a very soulful way with our clients. And I think we both have noticed over the years, like certain clients that come to us because that's the way we work. We don't work in a conventional way.
No,
and one of the
sure.
biggest topics that keeps coming up at the moment, because we keep, like yourself, we hear this, that the inner child and inner
Yep.
child healing and everything. So we're going to explore, we're going to delve deeper into that today to look at that, what that actually means. And so people can sort of identify that. And I know the work that you do with one-to-one clients, and also the big programs that you put on, big workshops, working with individuals to empower them. So you're one of our experts. So, you've been brought to Odyssey. They said, and bring Odyssey, bring Odyssey together and bring Amy and some of the other practitioners together. So it makes so much sense. Yeah. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So it's like, where do we begin? And then they just said at the beginning. So being a psychic medium, I'm going to hear these guys in at the same time, which no pressure at all. And I'm like,
Yeah, no pressure. No pressure.
And thank God you worked with me before. So I love it. Okay, thank you. They said like the illusion. So the illusion that we keep hearing about, the inner self, the inner child, the inner healing. And okay, thank you. They just sort of said, okay, I need to bring this. I knew there was a reason why. They sort of brought me this straight away because
Of course.
of course they did. And I use this in my workshops and my
Yeah.
clients. We got to imagine
Me
that
too.
this is us. Oh, I love that. We got to imagine this is like us. And it's created out of wood, this particular one, and it's those little dolls, as you can see. And they bring this in the sense of made out of wood, very much like a tree. How a tree, it absorbs its environment, and so does a child. From the moment it's, they said hatched out. Well, not that I would
Yeah.
use it, but that's what they're saying. But the moment that child hatches out, everything, even before that child is born, there's so much going on from the parents and what's happening to them in their lifetimes, the mother, the father, and the family as well, the family dynamics. And working as a soul practitioner, it would be like we talk about ancestral lines and what comes up, the story that keeps being told within the family, and then how it affects the child. So psychologically, there's stuff that comes up, of course there is, but we're going to look at what happens. It's like, where is it stored? So all the emotions, as we're saying, like this is made out of wood, there's all the grain on the wood and everything, and that's very much a bit like the human, the soul, how much information we're absorbing and what's going on. So they always use this, and they always laugh, my guides. With a tree, you can cut in half and see the rings of how many years old it is, and you can also tell if there's been drought, that the needs of the tree has been met. But you can't do that to the human being. And they laugh. They always roll around and laugh when I say that. So this is why they're giving the example. So the layer of ourself, wherever we're out on our journey, going internally within yourself, wherever there are wounds, and each layer of you deeper and deeper. And when they say wounds, it's not that you can't heal it. It's about looking at it, assessing it, and then working through it. And from a soul perspective, we would look at, and sometimes we label it the shadow self or the shadow work. And when we use the shadow work terminology, it's really about bringing something to light, to clear it, to move through it, to let go of it for the individual. Don't feel stuck in it, that you can work through that process to release it. So if I ask you now, Amy, imagine that I'm not a therapist. I don't know what the terminology inner child actually means. But if I was to come to you and I said to you, there's stuff that's been going on in my life, and then, it's indicated that, there's many different episodes of our lives that there can be trauma or the experiences that we're going through life. But if I was somebody that came to you and I was indicating that there was stuff going on for me, and in your mind it's like, oh, this is like the healing of the inner child, the wound, or there's something there. What does that actually mean, that terminology? Let's really hone it in and sort of say, what does it mean?
Yeah. Okay. So I guess in the first instance, it's interesting because obviously we use that terminology, but obviously when I'm working with a client and they're coming to me and saying, life is challenging for me, or it's uncomfortable for me here, or there's pain going on, something doesn't feel right. It's really about allowing them to share their story. from the beginning, because the story holds the clues, which is
Yeah.
what we would term, that's the inner child work, right? It's about
Yeah.
being able to tell our story in the first instance, because a
Being
lot of people,
heard.
yeah, don't get the opportunity to tell their story. But it's really understanding that we are currently, wherever you are in your life right now, it's because there's this thread that goes all the way back. So you start at the beginning, you're this kind of blank slate, and then you're picking up all this information from your environment, from the people that are around you, from the things that you experience. And without understanding our story, really going into our story and even just telling our story, we get to this space now where we just think we are a response to everything we've been through and
Yeah.
the relationships that we've experienced. So, really, for me, the inner child is about owning the entire story and bringing forward into the now all of what we've been through, and that person that we were when we were that child, when we were absorbing all this information. For me, that's the crux of where we become who we are. It
Yeah.
lays the foundation of the
It makes sense.
human that
Yeah.
we are as we go forward, right? And for
Yeah.
me, I know that I took that into every situation, circumstance, relationship. That came with me into everything, because that was the foundation of where I got an understanding of who I was through how other people were with me.
And that's the clue. It's the identifying what's going on for you, because with that inner child work of going all the way back, because for me, like working with them, it's like very much like the soul, that you come on a recycle mode and you'll go through
Yeah.
patterns, and until certain things are addressed or brought up, you're brought into certain families as your soul
Mm-hmm.
pod, that those individual members of that family are going to trigger the hell out of you, because it's going to stimulate some growth in whatever's going on. So when your soul comes here in this human shape and form where it fits nicely, snugly inside, it's learning. And by having those individual family members around you and the situations and your experiences, is going to trigger off some soul growth, which is not always comfortable. So it can also feel like those needs are not met in your childhood, and then it continues to move on. So it can
Yeah.
affect relationships, romantic
Yeah.
relationships,
Yeah.
with your confidence levels going into, workplaces, working with colleagues. I was on the bus the other day and somebody got really angry at the bus driver, and I was like, oh, this is because he thinks the bus driver thinks something else of him, because
Yeah.
his preconceived ideas have been formulated in early childhood, and you could see it. He turns from this grown man, probably like in his 40s, and he acted
Yeah.
like a 5-year-old. And that again is
Yeah.
one of the signs that you can identify, or working with clients, it's like, where is it coming from at any particular time when you're telling your story? It's like, why are you feeling like that? Why is it affecting you? What's going on? And it
Yeah.
normally does lead back to
Yep.
that inner layer of yourself, that early childhood. Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's where a lot of our beliefs are sort of formed. It's where we really start to learn. And I know, like doing the soul work, now when I look back, obviously it makes a lot more sense to me, because I can understand every step that got me here. And I feel like
Yeah.
that's really important also in understanding our soul journey. It's understanding why we went through that journey as a child to become the person that we were going to become, to be able to be the person that we are now. And it
Yeah.
opens up where we want to be able to go. For me, all of the cues, all of the clues have been in that journey of becoming who I was up till a certain point and who I have become. But how can you create who you truly wish to be if you don't understand how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, I totally agree. And your relationships with those members of family, those friends and everything, it's like learning, why does someone trigger you? Like trigger you as in, why do they make me so angry? Or why do they make me so upset? What's going on? And there's triggers, like I always think of a trigger like a gun. It's like not thinking, just fire off without thinking. It's that emotional challenges. And a lot of that is held in that inner shadow work of yourself. It's like
Yeah.
shadow work, really hiding, we're trying to hide it away, we push it away and stuff. So if we look at that in the sense of, how can we identify what I mean, I said to you, like, somebody on the bus the other day, I could hear him, kicking off because he thought the bus driver spoke to him in a certain way, because this guy on the bus who was trying to get on the bus that there was no money on his card or whatever is it automatically goes back to his wounds. He was triggered straight away, like, what is this guy saying, and why is he treating me like this? And he was talking to the bus driver and saying, why are you treating me like this? I can afford this, I do have money. And I'm like, wow, there's those emotional triggers. So we know that it can affect the confidence levels, but how can they identify there's something that is not actually what's going on here right now, but there are those deeper emotional wounds and stuff's coming up? Well, how does it affect people's lives?
In every way. Like, from when I think about my own life, it was on every level, because it's about who you're being, who you believe that you are because of what you've experienced. So it's really the opportunity to dig into asking the question, why do I believe what I believe? Why do I show up in life the way that I do? Where the triggers are great. I love the triggers, because the triggers are the thing that give you the chance to really go, why am I being like that? Is that really how I
Yeah,
want to be in this
yeah,
situation?
really
Because we feel
reset.
like we haven't got a choice
Yeah,
until we stop and until
yeah,
we get conscious. Because we can either live unconsciously, in the sense that this is just
yeah,
how I am and this is how life is coming at me, so this is how I'm responding. Or we get really intentional, i.e., we get on purpose about our life and understand and be curious to, well, why am I like this? Why do I
yeah,
respond like that? Why do I have these reactions? And as you unravel, I guarantee it will go back to these threads of, hold on a minute, it was because like people responded like that to me when I was
yeah,
younger. Like I was always taught to not trust. Don't
yeah,
trust people. Don't trust what they're saying to you. Don't trust yourself. So essentially, I didn't trust myself or other people in any situation. So to deal with that, I judged people a lot. So then I
yeah,
would throw judgments out at people. I would look at people on the street and just judge from what I
yeah,
saw. But it wasn't until I slowed down and go, okay, why do you do that?
yeah,
Because in
yeah.
some way, shape, or form, your child self thinks you're protecting yourself.
Yeah, that's it. That's the key word, is protection, keeping you safe, and protection, because that's why we have that subconscious mind. That's why it stores up all that information in our filing
Yeah.
system to protect us. So if something feels familiar, it's going to jump out and say, hey, protect yourself.
Yeah.
This is very familiar. It's the whole feeling. Now
Mm-hmm.
it's funny, because I had a client today, which is not by chance, I take it, I can imagine, but your client today, that he was saying that he wants to go out dating, but he's worried. He's had relationship he had with his wife, and that didn't work out, and then with his partner recently didn't work out. And we were talking about this, and there was, what came up for him when I was connecting to him was very much about him. It was allowing himself to feel vulnerable, because when you're vulnerable, something might happen to you. So with him, he was really resistant today. He was sort of saying, no, 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 this is because this is what happened to me, this is what happened to me in my childhood. And I'm like, yeah, you can hold on to that story as long as you want to hold on to, because that's the other side, is that you might know that certain things have happened to you in your childhood, and this is why you responded like this, to protect yourself. But I said, but you've come to me for me to help you to unravel the story, so that we can then help you to move forward. And I said, the biggest thing I'm hearing, my guides were shouting in my ear, and they were saying to me, and luckily he's okay with this. And I said, they're saying it's about vulnerability, about allowing yourself to step out into vulnerability again, and not to feel that you're being judged, because being judged, we're scared. Now there's a very thin line here, because there is that, where I hear it quite a lot, where people say, well, that's because it happened to me in my childhood, or that's because my
Yeah.
mother treated me that way, or that's because my father treated me that way, or this is because this happened. And then you go into the victim mode,
Yes.
which is so destructive, because you can continuously beating yourself up or beating up that situation, and you're not truly addressing it. You're sort of passing it over as it's somebody else's fault. So if it's their fault, I leave it to them, they can sort it out. But what if that member of family's passed over and you can't even communicate with them? Mind you, saying that as a medium, I normally bring their loved ones forward. Well, that's something else. So that happens too. But it's about being mindful that it's so easy to fall into that trap and say, it wasn't my fault, this is because of that person, and you don't take responsibility, you don't own it, and then that way it stops your growth. It was soul
Yeah.
growth.
Yeah. And
So be
that's the biggest
careful.
example. That one's the biggest example of, I can't trust people. How can I ever get into relationships again? Especially when you've been in spaces that might have been abusive or toxic in any way, shape, or form. It's like, how am I ever going to trust people again? So this is why this work for me is really, really important. It's about understanding, okay, where did that start from? The things around trust, like what did you learn about trust? Where did you learn it from? What did you experience with the people around you around trust? So it's really in understanding ourselves that we can really then step into something different. Because again, it's like, do I want this to be my experience of relationships and life? Also, it's being aware that I know for myself doing the work that I was almost taught not to trust my intuition. I was taught to respect elders regardless of what they said or did. I was taught to respect people that appeared older than me, that weren't even members of my family. I was taught to respect authority. I was taught, hey, go in the room and talk to that child even if you don't want to. So then constantly it's that thing of, I was being taught, if your intuition is telling you this and you don't really want to do it, you have to disregard that and you have to go and do what that person's telling you to do. So I can only understand that now because I'm looking backwards at those
Mm,
experiences to try and understand and unravel. Hey, I don't want to go into relationships like this. I want to go in differently. So for
yeah,
that, I need to look at me, like you're saying. It's no point looking
yeah,
at, my parents for that. It's I
yeah,
need to look at me and go, what experience do I wish to have? And how
yeah.
do I get there?
It's so true, and it's taking ownership of it, because it's very much like the parts of yourself, the parts of your soul needs to be looking at certain areas of your life. So it's like it would
Yeah.
be so easy to say, well, this has happened and I'm not going to move forward. Or you
Hmm.
get some people that turn around and say, well, that was in my childhood, I want to forget my childhood, or that's
Yeah.
got nothing to do with me now. But it has. It's like,
Yeah.
even entering into new relationships, anything, the confidence around going into a new job, even how you perform at work, people telling you must think in a certain way, parents
Yes.
telling you to think in a certain way. But by looking back to some degree, because I'm one of those therapists, and I think you're the same as me, that what I found, I felt very quite limited in the
Yes.
counseling that I did going back about 20 years
Hmm.
ago, that you just unraveled the past and you just kept on listening to the
Yeah.
person and that was it. But with
Yeah.
yourself and myself, that because we've learned other modalities on top of that, using NLP or using hypnotherapy, whatever it is, we can help that client to work through that, to help them
Hmm.
to change things. So there is, thank you, they just said, so going back, there will be that inner child that's had a certain situation happen. It's not saying it hasn't happened. If
Yeah.
actually by the work that we do on that inner child, that inner wound, that
Hmm.
shadow work of ourselves, it's by acknowledging that, yes, this has happened,
Yeah.
but how do you want to move forward now? Like,
Yeah.
sometimes some of the work that I do, that we send healing back to the inner child. So I use an NLP
Hmm.
timeline, and it's like, what does that child need to hear? So we identify where there is that trauma or the experience which is related to something today, because people think, oh, that was the past, gone on to do it. But the way, like, as this gentleman on the bus was triggered because his card wasn't working, it took
Yeah.
him all the way back to something somewhere, whether it was
Hmm.
his inner child or not, because I haven't worked with him, but it was connected to an experience. So we all have experiences in our lives
Yeah.
that are going to be triggered from time to time. Now, as a therapist, and very similar, I suppose, to yourself, that we take them back to, where was that, or can you identify where it was, and then what is it that part of you needed at that particular time? I know with work I've done
Hmm.
with, people have been sexually abused or rape or whatever it is, or any violence or anything, or it might just be a confidence issue. We'll
Yeah.
go back, where was it that it happened, and what did you need at that time? And
Right.
you sit with them, and consciously, if I ask somebody, like as I'm talking to someone on the street, they'll bring something up, and then it goes deeper, then there's the emotions attached to it, and then we're looking, what did you need at that particular time?
Yeah.
Who is it you needed? Did you need a hug? Did you need someone to say it's going to be okay? And do that work to release it, because directly you start releasing it, it's like a domino effect. You start releasing other parts or other areas of where there are other things that have got stuck. So that
Yeah.
child grows up, sort of thing, in that
Yeah.
timeline. It's like, oh, I feel better now, that, and it could be instantly, or it could be a few days. When I've worked with clients, I'm sure it's very similar to yourself, that you release that, whatever it is, the trauma, whatever's going on, and it might be something very, very small,
Yeah.
confidence issues or anxiety or panic attacks, whatever it is. And then it helps them to be slightly different. It's a different part of themselves that moves forward in
Hmm.
whatever they're doing in their life. Do you find that
Yeah.
the same thing for you with your clients, that you find?
Yes. Yes. That's how I kind of look at it, it's really about, for me, I lead my clients on a journey, really parent, because putting my soul journey, like my own healing journey, putting those two things together, there's that double understanding that you kind of have. But it's really about, that journey is really about you being responsible for you being responsible for the things that you've come here to learn. But it's really about, yes, what did that child need, and bringing that child forward to here, because it's that child that's stepping into all those experiences when you're not aware of it. So it's like, what did that child
That's it.
need in that moment, and what do you need right now? So it's about bringing those things together, right? It's about being able to reassure yourself, and a lot of the time it is that we haven't learned that we are our own safety, we are our own security, we are the ones that have our back. And how do we do that? So it's about bringing those two things together, so that now you've got this relationship with yourself, you've got the relationship with yourself that you always wanted, and those things that you're needing from other spaces, you're then able to kind of align all the facets of self and give those things to yourself in the first instance. So no longer are you in a space where it's like, I need this from other people. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, let's bring all of it together, right? For me, that's the crux of let's come back home to ourselves.
yeah,
It's really bring all you together, right?
yeah,
You abandoned yourself over there and in these spaces, and you run away and you suppress it. And like you said, it's like you just go, well, that happened over there, I don't need to know about it.
yeah,
But did
yeah,
your child really need that? Your child was the one that was going, hello, hello, see me, see me, see me.
yeah.
So see your child,
But it's
you
like any
know.
shadow work, isn't it? It's like any shadow work, anything that we want to push away or we want to hide, like this, we might call it skeleton
Mm-hmm.
in the cupboard. Some people might use that
Yep.
expression. It's that part that we want to say, I'm okay, I can deal with this. You know, I'm
Mm-hmm.
strong, because you've had to be strong for such a long time from what's gone on in your life, or
Yep.
even understanding that there is actually some work to be done. I mean, when we say emotional trigger, again, it's literally like, you could, like, how you might be normally in everyday life, and then suddenly something happens and you flip and you like, you act in a total different way, not like yourself. And then it's like, oh, hang on, where did that come from? That is an emotional trigger, and
Yes.
that is something attached to something that hasn't been healed, or something that you still have an issue with, because you might be thinking that person's making me, that person made me feel like that, they're making me feel like a child, they're putting me in that place. Actually they're not, because it's
Yes.
literally how you are seeing yourself, how you're addressing it, how you're
Yep.
addressing that emotion. You haven't quite sorted out where you needed that help back then, but you can do that to yourself. You can
Yeah.
now heal it, because there's
Yeah.
many people that are going to say, well, I can't have that conversation with my mother, or because they wouldn't understand, or I can't have my, you know, conversation with that partner, or that work colleague, or my boss, or that man down the road that really annoyed me, or that woman on the bus, or whatever it is. No,
Mm-hmm.
you can't, to some
No.
degree. So yeah, there are techniques you can use, as in, you know, journaling or writing letters or
Yep.
whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, thank you. They just said, well, this is important. They said, now it's not that these things have happened accidentally,
Yeah.
it's happened for your sole purpose. So you have
Yeah.
to think of it from a positive point of view, in the sense of, by these situations that have happened, actually it's about empowering yourself. You decide out of your free will whether you become the victim or
Mm-hmm.
surviving, or you turn around and say, right, okay, there's a lesson in here to teach me
Mm-hmm.
something, to help me to be the better version of myself. You're not competing with anyone to be better than anyone else, but it's the better version of yourself. So it's about
Yeah.
uncovering what's going on. If I want to then do something, you know, like, someone hasn't got confidence, we trail that back. Where did you lose your confidence, or where was it stumped, or something? This client today, you know, about, he wants to step into a new relationship, he doesn't like to be vulnerable. So it's like, okay, he doesn't want to be vulnerable. How is he then going to enter into a relationship, a loving romantic relationship? You know, he was talking about sex, he was talking about the logical, practical side of being in a relationship, but what he didn't bring up was the fact of the romantic side. And the romantic side is about allowing yourself to be vulnerable.
Absolutely. And that's the thing about relationships in particular. It's like, if I can only meet myself with walls and barriers and I don't want to look at me, then I'm definitely going to feel vulnerable. I'm definitely not going to feel safe going into any relationship, because why am I going to let somebody else see the what I see them as, the messy side or the dragons or the skeletons in my closet? If I can't look at them, then how am I ever going to be able to let somebody else look at them? And so then I'm in any relationship trying to hide it all of the time because I think it's terrible and your child thought it was terrible. And again, that's why bringing your child self into the relationship that you're having with you really helps, because you're able to talk to your child and kind of go, actually, it was okay. Like, it's okay to go through all of the things that you've been through, because you're the one that needs to give the validation that it was okay. Because
Yeah.
even if you get it from the outside person, from my experience, it didn't make a single iota of a difference until I was like, okay, Amy, you've been through all of this stuff, but you're still okay. You're still
Mm.
okay. And that's the essence of it. And I had to get okay with everything I had experienced before I could let somebody else into what I had experienced. So it's really about that slowing down, right? That's why we have the triggers. That's why we get the triggers, because
Yeah.
it's like the universe is sort of going, our soul self is going, this is something you need to look at,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
this is something that's holding you back from living
Yeah.
your joy, living your passion, whatever it may be. So that's how it makes sense when you go on this journey.
That's exactly it. That's exactly what I was thinking. And they just sort of said it is that it's about you having to go on this process. And that's why you have the emotional triggers in the first place, because actually you are ready to address it. You know,
Yeah.
it's not about running away from it, it's about you are now ready to address whatever came up for you, whatever's there hiding or lurking in the shadows. You know, you don't have to fear it anymore. It's about now you're ready. So actually, emotional triggers is a good way to show us, it's a good sign to sort of say, individually as an individual person, actually by having these emotional flare-ups, this
Mm-hmm.
must be actually a good time in my soul progression that it's time to address a certain situation.
Yeah. Yeah,
That makes
because what I've
sense.
learned, yeah, what I've learned is nothing is before its time. So
Yeah.
every layer of work I've done on myself, I've only got to that layer once I've done the layer before that, and once I'm ready to be able to look at those things because they're now impeding where I need to go next.
Okay, good. They just said question. I went, oh, good question. So they sort of said, what happens if you come across, or if you have a client that is so fearful of going back through the past or just doesn't want to do it? How do you move that person on? I mean, you know, what do you do if there is those wounds? What, you know, you've got experience. So what do you do in that case?
I everything is ultimately about the present.
Yeah.
So I'm with my client on a journey to go, okay, if you don't want to go that way, let's have a look at how those things are impacting you in the now.
Yeah, good
Look at
point.
your life now. How are you responding and reacting to what's going on now? Because ultimately, for me, it's about getting conscious, coming
Yeah.
into our awareness
Mm-hmm.
and watching ourselves in the now. Because
Mm.
that's where the effect is happening, right? That's where we feel impeded. That's where we feel like we're not able to move forward, is in the now. So
Yeah.
really, it is about the impact it's having on the now. So
Yeah,
let's look
good
at the
point.
impact and address the impact it's having on the now. How do you want to step into this situation that you're in now? Let's look at
Mm,
that. Let's address that. And in its own way, it's inevitable that there's a thread anyway.
yeah,
That's just the natural way it goes, right? But
yeah.
it's also asking that question around the soul's journey. Like, what is my soul really trying to show me, and where is it trying to move me right now? Because it's on a
Mm,
journey and it's a loop, right?
yeah.
You and I both know it's a loop.
Oh,
I know
yeah.
in my life, it just keeps coming back, and there's free will. So I don't have to look at this thing right now if I don't want to. But I'm also accepting of the fact that it's going to come back, and it's going to come back, and it's going to come
Yeah,
back
because it
until I'm
addresses it on
ready.
exactly. That's exactly it. It's that it addresses it on certain levels and layers. Like, you know, as therapists, we've done our own work as well, because when we train, we also have to see a therapist as well.
Yep.
So we will bring up stuff for us, and you know, we address it on certain levels. And then as we move on through our work and through our experience and through what we do with clients, there might come up as the issue, but on another layer of itself. So some people think that some people think that the issue, there isn't an issue, there, you know, it's okay, and or they've done the work, why is this coming up for me again? But again, it means it just needs to be addressed on a certain level of yourself and it's ready to come up. So yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah,
It is a very good point.
yeah. Because you go to deeper levels of self, you experience life at deeper levels. And my experience of this is once you are able to feel and allow yourself to feel certain things, then you're going to feel a deeper level of those things. But ultimately, our human journey, when we understand it, is about feeling, right? It's the
Yeah.
one thing that we can do as humans, having this human experience that is utterly magical. But feelings are not a pick and mix situation, right? You can't go, well, I don't want to feel this sadness over here, because then you're not allowing yourself to feel the full spectrum of any other feeling either. So it's the glory of being able to feel all of those things that we believe are difficult that allows us to feel all of the other things that are magnificent and glorious and really expand our joy. Like, we have to be able to feel all of it.
And you said recently, I was listening to you ran like a webinar for an hour, and there's this thing that you were saying about, reparenting ourselves,
Yes.
because there's that about the parenting of, knowing it's okay, the pat on the back. There's that
Mm-hmm.
reassuring us being more childlike to
Yes.
I mean, I'm doing that myself right now, but it's like exploring that child side of you. So from however old you are, it's like going out, having fun,
Yeah.
taking up new adventures and experiences that can really help grow the confidence and stuff. So
Yeah.
that makes sense. And
Yeah.
do you find that with clients that, by helping them on their journey, that you see them changing? I mean,
Yeah.
in their future?
Thrive. Yes. Because for a lot of my clients, and particularly like culturally, religiously, there's things that are put upon them, especially when they've come from certain backgrounds as well. It's like I
Yeah.
work with a lot of women who have been told that they come secondary to men. I work with a lot of
Right.
women that have been taught that their path in life is to be submissive, is to suppress their expression of themselves. And I know for myself, my life was so controlled. Those lives are
Mm.
so controlled that reconnecting, see, there's such a beautiful thing about reconnecting to that essence. So for me, the inner child is also about reconnecting to that essence of joy and awe and wonderment, that space of excitement about the next day that's going to come, not walking around with all the stress and worry that we do about
Mm.
life, because a child explores life openly.
Yeah.
So a huge part of this reconnection is that it reconnects you to those spaces where you can open up to experimenting with life
Yeah.
again as you would when you were a child, rather than
Yeah.
getting stuck with all the head talk that we have as adults. I shouldn't do this and it
Yeah.
shouldn't be this. And it's like, no, but life is supposed to be loving and miraculous and thrilling and exciting. And if you reconnect to your child, you can
Yeah.
reconnect to those spaces where you may never have been allowed to do any of that exploration and
Good
bring it
point.
to here,
Yeah, yeah,
you
good point.
know?
Because then it has that effect as you move forward in your work, your love life, and relationships, and everything in your life. It's sort of it's really that awakening. It's really sort of like addressing life in a different way, and also thank you. They just said, and also becoming more your authentic self.
Yes.
Because if you've had those programming, if you've had all that programming
Yes.
from those who've been your caregivers when you're a child, then you're not really your authentic self to some degree, because you're living your life through what your mum thought, what your dad thought,
Yeah.
your grandma, whoever. So you'd end up living your life through that, so which makes sense, right?
Yeah. See, this was something I was reflecting on today. For most of my life, I have been what other people wanted me to be.
Right.
I have
Okay.
been what society dictated. I have been what my culture should dictated. Like I'm Asian in background, I'm Indian in background, and it's like this is what Indian women should be like, and this is what your family should look like, and this is what you should do, and this is the school you should go to. And it's that release from those things. Once you can go, am I really all of those things that I was taught to be? Am I really all of those beliefs that other people have given me? Am I really all of those other things that I'm living? Because there's this space of emptiness to get to where you can really go, once you've looked at it all, you can go, I don't have to be any of those things. I can
Yeah.
start again,
Yeah.
right? And I
Yeah.
can be what I want to be, because you don't
Yeah.
have to be any of those things. But if you don't know that actually those were things that you experienced and you just became, if you're not
Yeah.
looking at those things, you can't change it. You
No,
can't then be like, I want to be something completely different, because you
do you know
create yourself.
I feel so excited what you just said, because I can so resonate with what you've just said. I see Amy as Amy, the woman that you are now. And then I was sitting there thinking that when you were saying it, and I was like, I see my background, I look like a white woman. Of course, I'm a white British born woman, whatever. But part of my life, a long period of time, my mum was married to a Jamaican. I had a Jamaican father for many years. And now, our food we ate, the way, lived our lifestyle. And I remember so clearly as a child looking in the mirror thinking, why am I white? Why am I not brown like my dad? It was, and not that biologically he's my father, but it was like literally because of my lifestyle, and also then how what he's been through in his lifestyle. His parents coming through during the Windrush, coming over to be nurse. His mum was a nurse and his father worked on the train tracks and stuff, and everything that he had gone through. So I was hearing that information from him, and how you should behave as a child, and as a woman. And
Mm-hmm.
then people don't see that because I'm white skinned. They don't understand, because they don't see the internal parts of me. And
Yeah.
this is why it's so beneficial to do that work on yourself, because I didn't fit in with the white kids, because the school was very
Yeah.
white. I went to, the area is very white. There was a lot of prejudice. There was a National Front at the time. There was
Mm-hmm.
skinheads kicking people with different colored skins and stuff, and hearing all the names that were brought up then. And it was very hard living in that situation. So as I grew up and then had my own kids, my own children, of course, then it affects how I parent my children. It goes
Yes.
on and on and on and on.
Yes.
And so you don't, you do the best you can at any given time.
Yeah.
I think you've got children, you understand this totally. When we've
Yeah.
had conversations, it's like, I said to you the other day about, my mum had I'd left washing up in my
Yes.
sink. I live on my own at the moment, and breaking through from another situation. I was in a long-term relationship, and I said, I didn't do the dishes. And you
Right.
laughed, and I said,
Yeah, I did.
my God, my mum was really OCD growing
Yeah.
up, and she had anxiety so bad that she was very house proud. She called it being house proud, but looking at it now, I can see as a therapist why.
Yeah.
Because she would have been beaten up if she hadn't cleaned the sink, with the
Yep.
dishes. And so
Yep.
it's instilled in me, not that I'm going to get beaten up, but it was like, and I said to you, it's so friend, I had a whole sink full of
Right.
dirty dishes, and I loved it because I'd broken out of the way that I felt, or the way I'd been brought up and stuff. And it's very similar,
Yeah.
you had a very similar story. It was interesting.
Yeah, yeah. See, and it's interesting because it's a similar thing, but then for me, it was slightly like, so for my experience, what I was taught culturally as part of the Asian community, for me, it was always like you deal with the things on the outside. So if everything looks okay, then nobody will know what's really going on and how messy it was inside, and how, the relationships were falling apart, and they were abusive and all these things. But if you always look okay, if you put on that mask, if you get ready, if your hair, so this is me in rebellion today, by the way, I have to say, because I was always told, oh, can you not do your hair? Oh, it doesn't look good like this. I'm like, no, I'm embracing my child. I love
Loving
this.
that.
But it was like, yeah, so if the sink looks clean and the dishes are done, then people will think you're clean and everything's okay in your life, because that's what they're looking at, right? So life was very much lived on what people looked at on the outside and what they could see on the outside.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I it's such a trigger, like little things like that. But it's like, again, if we don't look, we just assume. If you don't ask those questions, we're assuming that that's just how we are.
Yeah. And it's
Right.
interesting you said about the how you look on the outside, because I remember there was a particular situation after I'd got knocked down by the car, I had my near-death experience. I nearly had my leg amputated, my foot amputated. And I remember I had it in a cast, and it was like a long time, it was months. And I was walking around on crutches, and my foot would swell up, and it was really bad. And I remember talking to my mum. I was very depressed. My children were 5 and 7 at that time, and it was all too much. And was in a situation where I didn't feel I was being cared for. And I remember talking to my mum, and the first thing she said, make sure you've got your lipstick on, so when he comes home from work, you're ready to meet him. I had gangrene in my foot. I nearly had my foot amputated because I was thinking about putting lipstick on, because she told me. And I was like, because bless her, that's all she knew. So I'm not blaming her, but she had been brought up the similar way. So do you find also, by doing that shadow work on ourselves and working with our clients, looking at a soul perspective, how far it can actually move your client on, how it can help them to
Yeah.
free themselves?
Absolutely. Because otherwise, yes, we're just reliving. This is why generational cycles happen,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Because we're just going, oh no, this is just the way it has to be. This is just the way it has to be. This is just the way it has to be. Because we're just going, well, this is just how it's always been, right? But it's like with the parenting thing, yes, I initially could only parent in the way that I had been parented. It took the actual wanting to look at it and wanting it to be different. This is part of the thing, I guess. It's when you want to have a different experience, when you're
yeah,
done with kind of it being the way that it is, that you can step into, well, maybe there's a different way then.
yeah,
Because it's just
yeah.
asking that question, right? Maybe there's a different way to do this.
Well, I think it's when you get frustrated when you either don't have the confidence, or there's confidence issues or anxiety issues, or there's something that comes up for you, any of those certain triggers, anxiety or any of those sort of feelings that you're feeling, when they're overpowering so much and they're taking over your life. Then it's about, why is it doing this? I need to look at it deeper. What's going on for me?
Mm-hmm.
How can I, get on the train, not have a panic attack? How can I walk into a restaurant on my own? How can I walk down the street? How can I leave my house because I've got agoraphobia? What is it that needs addressing? Now, it's interesting. I'm just talking to you and they just said this, and okay, it's true. So as a psychic, I was saying this to someone today. As a psychic, we go back to this being our soul of who we are, the human shape and form. A psychic will tap into your energy stream around you. So we know that,
Mm-hmm.
whatever happens, if you've got fear, anxiety, whatever it is, or even when you're really happy, your brain is interpreting your world around you. You're visually seeing it, you're hearing it, and everything else. And your brain is processing it. And if it's an unhappy thought, it's going to chemically dump load into your body. So if you're scared, you're going to want to run away. And so your body is that given the adrenaline and everything else, and vice versa with the happy hormones and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as a psychic, we're picking up on the energy of who you are. So today I had a client and I said to her, well, this happened to you during your childhood. And she said, how do you know? I said, because all the fear, anxiety, all the stress, everything that you've gone through, your body has bared witness to this because you're visually seeing it, or you've heard it, or whatever, and your body holds into it. So
Mm-hmm.
I can see that she's got trauma from a childhood experience going all the way back. And then we went further ancestrally. So we went there back all the way down the ancestral timeline of, like, her mother had this happen to her, and violence, and going back and going back and back. And so that, we were saying about repeating patterns of the family. So then it moves forward, and until you clear it, it stays in your body.
Yeah.
So as a psychic, I will pick that up and sort of say, okay, your energy, I'm feeling into it. So it's more than just the emotional level. And,
Yeah.
I was saying to a client today, it's more than just me being a therapist looking at it from an emotional level. There's other things going on here. Does that make sense
Yeah.
to you? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you can almost feel it. It's like when you connect to yourself, because you are your guru at the end of the day. We are here
Yeah.
to kind of hold that torch for you
Yeah.
until you can see your own light. It's really like all of that is there, right? You can shift like all of these different things, but it is about that connection, right? You have
Yeah.
to be able to connect to yourself, and you have
Yeah.
to understand, because you can almost feel like, I know that I spent the hugest chunk of my life, and I know that a lot of my clients do live in that fight or flight or fawn kind
Yeah.
of mode, right?
Yeah.
It's very, very stressful, and you can feel it in your body because you're holding it here. Like
I'm sure.
often I will have to remind myself that I'm not in that space. Right? That's me
Yeah.
connecting to my child, going, hey, 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 I've got you. There's nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah.
I've got
Yeah.
you. Right?
Yeah.
Because actually, it was when those terrifying situations were happening when I was younger, nobody had me, and I
Yes,
abandoned
that's
me.
it. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
told myself off. I thought it was my fault. So I'd be like, well, hey, let's get far away from Amy. But now it's kind of like I hold myself and I'm like, I've got you. Breathe. It's okay. You don't need to be afraid anymore because you're not that person that's afraid of it. Right. So when that thing is triggered, when you're triggered into these kind of situations, really, it's about that, right? Because that energy is in you all of the time. And it wasn't until I worked with that, and it wasn't until I realized that I was able to come out of that energy, and my whole body language changed.
Yeah.
Everything about me changed. But again, it's like, get present, Get
Yeah.
with yourself.
It's interesting you're saying that, because there was something about you abandoned yourself, that disassociation we use in therapy.
Yeah.
We use that word disassociation. It's
Yep.
very much about, burying our head in the sand, don't want to connect
Mhm.
to it. You can get some people that don't want to connect to their feelings or their emotions, and they're
Yep.
just like, no, it's okay, it's fine, whatever.
Hmm.
And then you're not being your true authentic self. So,
Yeah.
it's that, well, let's own this, let's work through this, let's reprogram, I want to be the best version of myself so that I can live the life I want to live, which is so
Yeah.
important. It really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
So
The crux.
if say for instance now there's somebody out there and they're listening to this, I mean, we've spoken a bit about, the emotional triggers and seeing some of those signs, and that I think it gets that such an uncomfortable feeling within themselves that they know that something
Yeah.
needs to be done. But what would you say to somebody that is listening to this and they're wondering, is it not just that we call it the inner child, but the shadow work, or maybe there's something that they need to look at to address? Is there something that they can do themselves, do you think? If they're not quite ready to come along and talk to you at the moment, or they're not sure if that really this is what's going on for them, that they just think it's just confidence issues or whatever it is, but we know that they stem from somewhere else, what sort of advice or information would you give them right now just to help them?
The number one thing I would suggest, and which is what I work with all my clients in the first instance, before I even start working with them, is get with yourself. Like, just daily, even if it's at the beginning only for a few moments, just be with yourself and watch yourself without judgment. This is not a judgment call. It's not I'm watching myself and going, oh my God, what are you doing? It's just be present with yourself. Just watch yourself
Mm,
for a little
yeah,
while and see what you discover, and go
yeah,
and write it down
yeah,
without judgment, without any of those things. Just be curious about who you are, why you are, and how that's helping you right now. And
yeah.
is it helping you or hindering you? And is this what you want to be? Simple. Just keep it simple.
Makes so much sense. It does make so much sense. Well, Amy, thank you for today. It's been a real
Pleasure.
eye-opener, and it's been lovely to share this with you, like my soul sister here, when we're here to help
Oh,
individuals. So absolutely love this. And it's about helping whoever needs that help at any given time. But you're part of Odyssey, and I know you do stuff yourself as well, but it's like by hearing all this information, it helps people to understand themselves a lot better. And I can only do but help individuals on their journeys. That's what they need, and that's where they're at, and they're ready to receive, right?
absolutely. And that's what it's about. Like, life is magical when you live it that way. So it's
Yeah,
up to you to be able to create that. And
yeah,
yeah, this is the journey that we're on, right? Trying to help people to understand that they can create a different experience.
yeah,
So
totally. By
thank you
being
very
in the
much.
You're welcome. By being in the present moment, it's so much more rewarding, because you're
Yeah,
rewriting your future than being stuck in the past and how it affects you. Definitely. Yeah, you're right.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
thank you, Amy. Thank you so much
Thank
for your
you.
time today. Thank you.